Good day, ladies and gentlemen. I am your host, Still Guns, and welcome to the Weapons of Dead Space. For 10 long years now, I have been an outright fan of this series, and it pains me that there hasn't been a new one in, well, 6 years now. However, just because it hasn't had a new release in 6 years doesn't mean I'd like people to forget about it, and so that's why I'm making this series on the Weapons of Dead Space. In today's episode, we return to Dead Space's mining tools with the third obtainable weapon, the Flamethrower. It does what it says on the box. It throws flames about. The Flamethrower is the third obtainable weapon in the game, or rather the entire series. You can find the schematic for it literally moments after stepping off the tram in Chapter 2, and it takes 18 power nodes to fully upgrade. In Dead Space 2, it is found in Titan Station Elementary School, not long after the gym section. Why the kids were playing with flamethrowers instead of Bunsen burners is quite beyond me. This time it takes 24 power nodes to fully upgrade. And in Dead Space 3, the blueprint can be found in the Archaeology Co-op mission. So if you want the blueprint in Dead Space 3, be sure to bring along a friend. The flamethrower in Dead Space is not really a flamethrower, it's more like a giant blowtorch. Regardless of what it is or isn't, the flamethrower's purpose was to melt through layers of ice on comets, so that other tools could be used to get the valuable minerals underneath. The strength of the flamethrower varies from game to game. In Dead Space 1, it isn't a particularly strong weapon, it's rather weak. In Dead Space 2, it becomes a lot stronger, but in Dead Space 3, it becomes weaker again. There is one enemy type that the flamethrower is unexpectedly effective against: the Brute. Once hit and set alight, a Brute will halt its attack, back up, and won't attack again until the flames go out. This allows you to get around to its unarmored back and use something a little more effective against it. As to be expected by now, there are two main variants of the flamethrower, one of which is split into two sub-variants. On the left is the 26th century PFM 100 Hydrazine Torch Flamethrower, and on the right, the Sovereign Colony's Armed Forces Flamethrower, or SCAF Flamethrower for short. In Dead Space 1, the PFM 100 is either broken or incomplete. As you might expect, it doesn't work in a vacuum, but the fuel that it uses, hydrazine, is a hypergolic, which means it ignites when in contact with an oxidizer. So typically when hydrazine is used, there is always a liquid oxidizer in a separate tank. Of course, this is just a developer oversight. The developers obviously thinking that it's a flamethrower, flames don't work in space. In a way though, it fits with the nature of the Ishimura. Not only is the ship old and dilapidated, but so are the tools. It's a very different tool in Dead Space 2. Its alternate fire changes, the amount of damage it does also changes, and so does its ammunition capacity. In Dead Space 1, the flamethrower only did a maximum of 1.5 damage, whilst in Dead Space 2, it had a maximum of 12 damage. To balance out the higher amount of damage, the Dead Space 2 flamethrower holds much less ammunition, 50 by default and 175 maximum, whilst in Dead Space 1 it holds 125 by default and 250 maximum. The alternate fire changes from a projectile-like blast of flame in Dead Space 1 to simply launching an entire canister of fuel that explodes like a grenade. The exploding canister uses more ammunition than the flame projectile, but it uses the fuel straight from your inventory rather than from the weapon's pool. It also fully reloads the weapon, meaning you'll always have the maximum amount of fuel to use after launching a canister. In Dead Space 3, the Flamethrower has the same default fuel capacity as the Dead Space 2 Flamethrower, but it does less damage, seemingly somewhere in between the Dead Space 1 and Dead Space 2 Flamethrowers. Its maximum fuel capacity appears to be 151, the highest number I could get it to reach in testing. Its incendiary grenade launcher is in a similar state to the grenade launcher on the pulse rifle, holding a minimum of 2 and a maximum of 7. But where the Scaff Flamethrower really struggles is with range. The Scaff Flamethrower's range is ridiculously short, being almost completely ineffective beyond a few feet in front of the barrel. Its short range makes it a very high-risk weapon to use in Dead Space 3. And that, coupled with its lower damage, makes it a weapon that I would never, ever recommend that anyone use seriously in Dead Space 3. That being said, if you do want to use the Flamethrower in Dead Space 3, it can be constructed with a standard heavy frame, a pneumatic torch with the default tip as the upper tool, and a survey charge with the diffraction torus tip as the lower tool. The Flamethrower is a weapon that the Dead Space community very much has a love-hate relationship with. Its fluctuating effectiveness and short range make it one of the less popular weapons in Dead Space, but its crowd control and damage over time abilities can make it surprisingly useful. But in my personal experience, it is a weapon with more flaws than advantages. And that just about wraps everything up. I've probably missed some information in this video, but hopefully not too much. The next video will be on the line gun. Once again, do let me know if there's anything I can do to improve this series. I'll catch you in the next one, and until then, good night.